Hi everyone, my name's Georgina Kreutzer and welcome to my third tutorial on mixed media paper with Strathmore. We're starting out with a myriad of colours. My portraits, as a lot of people noticed, are quite vibrant, and I use a mix of warm and dark tones to gather depth and dimension in portrait art. So what I always love to start out with is highlights. I've already got a real basic outline of the facial details. This wasn't meant to be a tutorial on composition of the face. I think that deserves a whole extra tutorial. I'm really going to be showing how I render the colors and get the surface image popping out from the page. So highlights are always a first. Here I'm using a pastel pencil because I can really accurately apply the color where I want it to be, and it's still soft enough for us to blend later, without being so soft that it's going to smudge everywhere and make a mess. The next step is to take a sharp pencil and outline the main features of the face. So eyes, eyebrows, nose, mouth. And we're not going to ever darken these more than we need to. Light layers are key in any kind of art that I do. And as you can see, I'm taking some liberty with my color already, putting in blue where others would either be using a graphite pencil or a warm tone. I'll zoom in so you can see a bit better what I'm doing. I usually like to start with eyes first, but in this case I'm focusing partly on the mouth. As you can see, a sharp pencil really is key. And I'm just outlining those shapes, taking careful consideration at this point at a reference image, if you have one, or if you're going to be using the one I'm supplying on the instruction page. And small, light layers with the pencil is the method to be used throughout the entire drawing. As you've learned in my past tutorials, you can always add more, but it's harder to take away once you've put something down. Darkening up those highlights again and using an old brush, I've just blended them, and I'm just going over and over. Something I love about Strathmore's paper is that it's smooth enough to get that beautiful, smooth final render. But at the same time, it's got enough tooth to grab the pencil or pastel to the page. At this point in the drawing, and at any point you can slow down the video to see what I'm doing, but at this point in the drawing there is no strict method of what I'm doing. I'm really just looking at the colors in the skin tone, and I'm kind of saturating them in my mind. It can be a process that's a bit difficult to explain, but if you actually look at someone's face, even in real life, it doesn't just reflect that particular person's skin tone. There are blues in there, there are greens and reds, and I really like to show those in more saturated form in my artworks to create a more intriguing final image. So blues are an absolute favourite for me. If you've ever followed my art, you'll probably have picked up on that. But I use blue as a shadow. I like to use it to emphasize parts of the face, especially around the eyes, around the cheekbones, around the jawline. And I like to use it to darken up the darkest parts of shadow, so under the rim of the eyelid and the corners of mouths. And from a distance, even though we're using such an unnatural color for the face, it really starts to stand out in an intriguing and natural way. And not so much natural as a naturally ethereal way. So mouths have always been a really tricky thing to do, and if you practice them enough, you can create a formula of shadows and highlights to create a convincing one every time. And I like to make sure there's shadows coming from the corners of the mouth, and always make sure there's a good highlight along the top edge and somewhere along the bottom lip. And I'm just taking some lighter pencils and constantly layering colour very slowly. I'm putting in some hair details, but that's something that can come at any point in the drawing, and Something I take particular liberty in is making sure the hair doesn't have too much detail. I like to use hair as a way to fill in the composition of the page. We're alternating between cool and warm tones. I'm just going around with a pink pencil and filling in jawline, details of the nose, details of the cheekbones. Noses are another tricky thing that are great to master and just practice over and over. With the right placement of highlights along the ridge and down at the corners of the nose can really create a convincing final image. Usually I do eyes first, so I couldn't really help but finally get those looking more complete. But I love to blend dark around the eyes, no matter what eye color, into some quite stark highlights at the center. And it really does make eyes look alive, I find, in most of my portrait artworks. And always a good tip when starting out with portrait work is to avoid doing the front-on portrait where the face is looking directly at the camera. And that way you can learn all the intricacies and challenges that come with a 3/4 portrait like this. Even though you don't need to make the face completely symmetrical, it comes with its own herd of challenges. So using a brush, I'm just blending in those colors on the cheek. By accident, I blended a bit of blue that I didn't want to. As you can see, I'm just fixing it up by putting some white pastel over and blending those just to lighten it up again. What you could do if that happens is put down some fixative spray and do a couple of layers, just as I just did. I'm defining hair a bit more, which often helps frame the face and make the face look less like it's just floating on the page. And a real key thing to be paying attention to is making sure those highlights are constantly standing out. The highlights are going to always be fading away as you layer up more pencil over the top. But they're such an important part of any drawing, I find, that it's good to be vigilant in making sure that they're constantly layered up. I'm just adding some other details of the face, some freckles, and deepening those shadows. When I draw portraits, you'll notice that I pick a color and then I always balance that color somewhere on the face. I won't just add pink to the cheek and leave it. I'll then put some pink on the temple or the side of the nose and constantly be balancing those colors on the face. And I've noticed in observing the way other artists work that this isn't a very common way of practice, but it's certainly what I feel most comfortable with. I don't just pick an eye and get the eye looking perfect and then move to the next eye and then move to the mouth and so on. I slowly build up the entire image from the ground up by sharing the colors across the whole face. And this is a method that you may really dislike doing or you might find great enjoyment doing. I hope it just shows you that there's other ways of doing things. I'm just slowly layering again and again those pencils that I picked out before at the beginning of the tutorial. And at the start, I did select those blues and reds so that I would stick to them throughout the duration of this drawing. If I don't do that, I always find that I'm using too many colors, and it just makes sense to have a color scheme sorted at the beginning of your drawing so that you don't pick a wrong red or green. And if you have studied color theory, you'll understand just how important it is to get those shades right in a drawing. And color theory is something I strongly urge people to have a look into. It makes all the difference in colored artworks. And it's really just a matter of laying colors from this point. Typically when I get to this stage in a drawing, I've stopped looking at the reference, maybe glancing at it just to make sure I'm on track, but here, we all know what a face looks like, and you can really just eyeball what's going on. You can see what needs to be darker, what needs some more highlight, and you can be adding in new features. And once again, unless you're drawing a portrait of someone specifically, you don't need to be sticking to the reference picture, and you can give yourself creative liberty. And that's something I usually like to do in my artworks. The eyes are certainly something that require a great amount of patience and probably the most amount of time. And next, I would say the mouth. I notice when I draw, I definitely concentrate detail and a certain level of refinement around those areas. And then the neck, the ears, the hair, it's fine to have those a little less refined, a little more sketchy. And I think this is something that particularly gives the artwork a ethereal quality. I'm warming up the image using a watercolor pencil, but in this case I won't be applying water. I just find that sometimes they work smoothly over non-soluble pencils. Darkening up hair and eyebrows. It's something that I usually do leave until the end, and this is the first time I'm applying black to the page, except for when I added black to the eyes earlier. And if you're not really brave enough to be adding blue, that's fine. I would just pick a darker shade of the paper that you're using if you're going to be showing shadows. But I do strongly recommend that you would incorporate cool tones into drawings for shadow. Even if you look at my hand that's been videoed, it's got a purple shadow on it, which you probably wouldn't expect, but it was probably around dusk when I was drawing this image, and that was the natural light coming in through my window. And as you can see, once again, I'm just balancing those colors. I'm using this brown on nearly all parts of the face and balancing it with other parts of the face over and over. And at this point, the portrait's nearly all finished. I'm now just adding details more for the sake of enjoyment than because the artwork needs anything else. And as artists, you often find it can be hard to know exactly when to stop an artwork. I think that's something that takes much more practice than people realize. So here I'm just putting those highlight details back in the main elements of the face before blending them with a sponge. And then to counteract that, darkening the shadows. If you have any questions on this artwork, be sure to pop them in on the forum that's on the Strathmore website, and I'll answer for that the week. Portraits are certainly something I think all artists find trouble doing and perfecting and mastering. It's something that you can constantly be working on. And lastly, I'm just making sure the details on the eyes are the most refined. Because if there's any part of the drawing that you want to spend the most time on, it's probably the eyes, getting those right. If you get your eyes looking wrong, the whole drawing will look wrong, but everything else can more or less have a bit of less refined element to it and can still look okay. But it's the eyes that really need the most time. So just refine the shadows around the bone into the eyebrows. and a final touch-up again of those highlights. It's something that you can just do over and over. And there we have it, our final ethereal-looking portrait on Strathmore's toned paper. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you for the final tutorial next week.